The Detroit Lions just avoided a pretty embarrassing upset by beating the Chicago Bears this past Sunday. And while there are a lot of people hyping up the fact that this team showed great resiliency in this comeback, there were still some ugly parts of this game that are worth talking about. Let's get into that and a whole lot more in this video, starting right now. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, and in this video, like you saw at the top, we are definitely going to be talking about this Lions' very impressive win over the Chicago Bears yesterday, and just all the things that kind of went into it. And trust me, even though it's the next day, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my mind around what exactly transpired in that game, because the easiest way that I can kind of define it is it probably being one of the most Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of games I've ever seen the Lions have. This game is one that they probably should not have won. They played some pretty ugly football for probably about 95% of it, but were able to gut it out and get a very much needed win by playing very sound football in the fourth quarter. And so while I want to be able to just sit here and talk about how amazing it is that the Lions are 8-2 and how they did everything that they needed to do to be able to get this win, that wouldn't be 100% true or honest if I were to just come on this video and do that. We got to talk about the ugly parts too, because that is just as much a part of this game as how great that fourth quarter was. There was a reason the Lions needed that amazing fourth quarter, and I think it's worth talking about in the context of, hey, why these things can't continue to happen and what things the Detroit Lions need to clean up in order to be able to continue to win down the stretch of this season. The season, while it looks very easy on paper, like I said a couple weeks ago, there are still some tough matchups. And if the Lions aren't careful, they could have more games like the one that they did against the Bears. And trust me, I don't know if Mike and Hart can actually take any more nail biters like the one that we just saw yesterday. So without further ado, let's get into one of the biggest things that really stood out to me in this game. And I feel like we have to start with one of the main, reasons that the Lions were in this position, as well as one of the main reasons that the Lions were able to pull out this much needed win. And that being quarterback Jared Goff. Listen, it's no secret. We've talked about it plenty of times on this channel. My history with Jared Goff isn't one of the prettiest, right? I haven't been one of the biggest supporters of him in the past. But this season, and even a bit of like late last season, I was really starting to come around to the fact of like, you know what? He's doing all of the right things and he's playing really sound football and keeping this team in position to win. And I felt like this season, he had really taken some really big strides to not just play that well at home, but also play that well on the road. And it was really starting to showcase, especially in the win column with how the Lions were playing at that time. Going into this game, being 7-2, one of the things that I was least concerned about going into this game was going to be the performance of Jared Goff. I didn't think I would have to worry about, turnovers or boneheaded mistakes and things of that nature. But that's very much what we got. And throughout watching that game, it was probably one of the more frustrating, performances that I've seen Goff have probably since he first got here back in 2021. Going back to the start of the season, Jared Goff was on a very hot streak of not throwing interceptions, having over 300 passing attempts without being able to turn over the ball. And obviously it wasn't plausible to think that, listen, he was going to continue that streak throughout the entirety of that season. It wasn't even plausible to think that he wasn't going to have multiple interceptions in games throughout the year. But this past game against the Bears, it wasn't just the fact that he was throwing interceptions. It was some of the ugliest interceptions I've seen him throw, like I said, in his time in Detroit. And listen, I'm almost going to give him a mulligan on the first one because, yes, I do think there was incidental contact, and I think that's why that pass is intercepted because Sam Laporta wasn't able to come out of his break cleanly. But the next two are a little more questionable. I get that one of them was tipped, and I think you can make an argument of like, hey, is that pass intercepted if it's not tipped? I still think it's probably not the most, it wasn't the best or smartest pass for him to make because it was still going to be getting thrown into double coverage. And you run the risk of, even if, that pass does get through, what if the receiver gets hit? What if the ball gets popped up into the air? That's still not, an ideal situation, in my opinion, to throw that type of pass. And then the other one that he threw to Tremaine Edmonds was just a bad interception. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It was just a really bad looking pass. And that's just not the things that we're used to seeing Jared Goff do. And that level of performance, that the fact that the offense wasn't in rhythm, from a passing standpoint, is one of the reasons why the Lions were kind of still trailing in the second half of the game. Obviously, they were able to go into halftime with a lead over the Bears, but it always kind of just felt like this team was lagging behind because you just didn't know what was going to happen whenever Jared Goff dropped back. And I know there were people that were getting on their high horse and probably getting to the point where, like, hey, this is why you can't pay him. This is why you can't rely on him, and this, that, and the third. I wasn't quite there because, again, the Lions still have so much in front of them. They still have so many opportunities to still be able to lock up this division, to still be able to have a home playoff game and do all of those things. But I would be lying to you guys if I said I wasn't sitting on my couch, frustrated out of my mind by the performance that I was seeing him play up until the fourth quarter. And I say up until the fourth quarter because Jared Goff did a masterful job of changing the entire narrative by having such a great performance to be able to get this team not just in a position to compete for the game, but to actually win the game. To go 5 for 5 for 71 yards, to be able to throw a beautiful touchdown to Jamison Williams, who we've had so many questions about and about the rapport that those two have, was something straight out of a movie script, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know if you could have written a better way for this team to get back into contention than for those two to link up for that touchdown pass. But then to not just settle for getting, back into the game, but again, to be able to orchestrate another drive right after that, to be able to take the lead is just as impressive. To still go for 4 for 6, 35 yards, and to allow David Montgomery the opportunity to get the go-ahead touchdown against his former team. Again, this is stuff that you see in movies, and it's definitely feels like this Lions team has, some sort of positive energy behind them that's allowing them to defy the odds. Because like I said, you don't see teams, play this way, specifically offensively, to have, 4 turnovers, to lose the time of possession battle by such a wide margin and still get wins. It doesn't happen very often. But for the Lions to do it and for Jared Goff to be the one steering them in that direction after initially putting them in that hole says a lot about how much he's grown in his time since he's been in Detroit. Now, while Jared Goff had his struggles on the offensive end, the Lions defense had their struggles on their side of the football as well, and a lot of that is due to the fact that, again, that the offense was not putting them in the most advantageous positions. But still, this was the side of the ball that going into this game we had a lot of question marks about. Morgan and I did an entire video breaking down some of the things that went wrong in Los Angeles against the Chargers. And for the most part, we felt like, hey, these were a lot of mental mistakes. These are things that the Lions can fix. And if going forward, they're not going to face as many high-powered offenses as the Chargers and should be able to get back on a roll. Again, that's not quite what happened. And listen, I hate to be this guy. I hate to be the person that likes to point fingers, but I do believe that in certain situations, you need your best players to play at their very best. And I thought going into this game, Aiden Hutchinson being matched up against Darnell Wright was going to be an opportunity for him to really break out of his sack slump and really be able to just kind of impose his will on this game. And again, much like with Jared Goff, through the majority of this game, that's not what happened. Darnell Wright did a really good job of kind of neutralizing Hutch for a good portions and long stretches of that game. But much like Jared Goff on this other side of it, when this team needed Aiden Hutchinson the most, when they needed a stop, when they needed to be able to get off the field and kind of, close the door on this game, he showed up in the biggest moments. And that's what you're hoping for, again, out of your best players, whether it's Jared Goff, whether it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, whether it's, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, your offensive line, whatever the case is, or Aiden Hutchinson. You're expecting your best players to show up when the lights are brightest, when the moment, requires them to be there. And Hutch did it in a huge way. Now, as for the rest of this defense, is still going to have to catch up. I would say, like, outside of Aleem McNeil and Brian Branch, the rest of the defense was just so-so. Oh, and Alex Anzalone. Outside of those 3 other guys, I would say that the rest of the defense was very so-so. And it's something that, again, continues to plague this team over and over and over again. While I can sit back and say, listen, I think this probably was and will be Jared Goff's worst game of the season, which I feel like I said the same thing after the Ravens game. I definitely feel like this will by far be the worst game that Jared Goff will play all year. This defense, I'm not quite sure. And I think that continues to be The theme here is that, listen, there's going to be another game or maybe even two where the offense starts slowly and is going to need time to maybe get into a rhythm. Dallas is one team that I kind of look at in that context, right? Listen, the game might start off a little slowly, but by like the second, third quarter, I think the offense will get humming. The same thing could be true for a Vikings game. The question then becomes, can the defense mount up enough muster to be able to, hold the floodgates back while the offense gets things going? And so far, I just don't know. I think what we were able to see out of Aiden Hutchinson in that last play is able to at least show, like, hey, listen, much like Jared Goff, they're not afraid of the moment, that they can kind of, still rally and rise to the challenge, which was something that they struggled to do in those first couple years under Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn. You guys remember, some of that Baltimore game where they had opportunities to get off the field and it didn't. The fact that the Lions were able to, again, first play that they got on the field after going up, to get that type of turnover, to get a safety and basically close the door in the game is huge. It's a huge sign of maturity from this team. What we still need to see from this defense, though, is consistent play from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. And I think we've only seen that in a couple of opportunities. And most of that have been against poor, teams with younger quarterbacks or offenses that just aren't quite clicking yet. While this Lions defense isn't going to play that many more teams that have winning records on the year, they are still going to play some quarterbacks that are fairly elusive or fairly dynamic. And this defense is going to have to find ways of neutralizing those threats and being able to, again, play at a high level so that your offense doesn't necessarily need to score 31 or that they can't afford a single mistake on their side of the ball. That type of thing just kind of can't happen. And again, while I'm praising Aiden Hutchinson for the fact that, again, that he had an amazing play to close out the game and showed up in the brightest moment, I'm also not going to absolve him from the fact of, again, he needs to be more consistent. It was something that I said in a video a couple weeks ago about going into the second half of the season. Aiden needed to kind of step up a little bit more and do a little bit more. And I think that's very much needed at this point. And in saying that, I'll reiterate the same thing I did say in that video. I'm not saying that Hutch isn't doing enough. I just think that he needs to be able to elevate his game to another level because this defense needs him to. It's him and Aleem when it comes to that defensive line. Those are the two guys that you kind of look at right now and say, hey, those guys can go out there. They can go out and get a sack. They can go out there. They can create pressure on any given down. And they just need to be able to do it more consistently down the stretch of this season. Now, the last thing I want to say in regards to this game is related to some of the things that were coming out after this game. And this is just a personal thing with me. I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you think this way or anything like that. This is just a personal thing that Miko kind of feels, right? When it comes to how we want to categorize this game, I know there were a couple fans, some of the players said this, I think even Dan Campbell said this, in the light of, hey, we know this is a good team because we were able to win this game. And that just is a statement that I just don't really doesn't jive well with me. All right, let's just say it that way. And I say that because going into this game, I thought the Lions were a good team. They were 7-2. There was no reason to not think they were a good team. The fact that they allowed the Chicago Bears to jump on them the way they jumped on them was the sign of hey, maybe they're not as good as some people thought. But the fact that they won this game and the way they won it isn't, for me, a stamp of approval of hey, this is how you know this team is good. What it does tell me is that this team is resilient. And I think that's the word that you've been seeing the team kind of use a little more in social media and things like that. Look how resilient this team is. And I think that's the best adjective to describe this win, because through 3 quarters, they didn't play like a good team. Even though I think and I think some of you would also agree, this is a good team. They just didn't play like it for 3 quarters. And going forward, they have to be able to realize that they have to do that. They have to play up to the standard that they've already established for themselves for 4 quarters. Because there's going to be games down the stretch where, hey, another team isn't going to just get field goals and leave the door open for you. You're going to have teams, possibly a Minnesota Vikings team, possibly the Dallas Cowboys, possibly the Denver Broncos, and whatever type of craziness is going on over there. Those are games that you can't afford slow starts. You can't afford to just be oh no, we're going to just show how resilient we are in the 4th quarter. If you guys remember back during the Jim Caldwell era, I think that's one of the main things that got those teams in trouble, is that they always just kind of felt hey, fourth quarter comes around, we can get it together. I don't think this is something that Dan's going to allow this team to just like be okay with. I think it is something that him and the coaching staff are going to really drill home the fact of like, hey, you guys did an awesome job in being able to fight back. That's what we want to see. We want to see you guys not give up. And I think that's awesome. And I think that's something that this team absolutely does need, because in the event that things do just kind of go the wrong way, you have a fumble or a drop pass and things like that, you want this team to be able to bounce back and believe that they're still in it. But I think the thing that you also need them to understand is that this is a good football team. And in order to be a good football teams play to that standard for 4 quarters. That is something that needs to continue to happen down the stretch if the Lions want to, again, not just make it to the playoffs, but make a push, make a serious, push to get to the Super Bowl and be seen as true contenders to win the Super Bowl this year. And so again, I'm not saying that this team isn't good because they won this way. I think it's very important that they won this way. And I'm glad that they won this way because, again, to get on here and do a video after losing to the Bears of all teams would have been terrible. I would have been pissed. I would have hated having to do this video. But the fact that they won is a huge sign, again, to how much this team has grown from where they were when Dan Campbell first inherited it to where they are now. Is such a huge testament to him as a coach, to the players for buying in. And I think it really does show just how resilient, how tough this team is to be able to overcome poor play at the end. But at the same time, they are a good football team, and they've been showing it all year, aside from maybe 2 games, maybe 3 if you even want to count this one. They've shown that they're a good team. They just need to be able to do it for the entirety of games so that they can really continue to seize every opportunity that is in front of them. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What were some of your biggest takeaways from this game? There were so many other, amazing performances that we didn't get to talk about, but I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section what really stood out to you. Also, if you're looking for any more content on the Detroit Lions, be sure to head over to pridedetroit.com, where we're uploading new articles daily, literally multiple articles within a day. So be sure to check out the website if you're looking for any more news, rumors, or whatever the case may be on the Detroit Lions. And last but not least, be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified anytime we upload new videos or anytime we go live over here on YouTube. With all that said, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.